Anytime you got questions, just stop and raise your hand, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Okay, so let's come. How many people been to Taiwan then? Wow, so almost you. Yeah, so here, you're familiar with this map of Taiwan. However, how many people you know? We have these indigenous tribes. Okay, and we are not only 9 indigenous tribes, we have 16. There are 16 recognized tribes, indigenous people in Taiwan. And in terms of population, we have 23 million people in Taiwan, but it's about 2% of population, indigenous population. So some people call them minority, some people call them, it's really kind of invisible. And today, use food. I think food is an important tool. Food is, I call, in this study also, it's kind of weapon for them to gain their cultural right back to themselves. And they are able to speak for themselves. So today I'm going to use a lot of narratives that's from my interview, and for those indigenous people to speak for themselves. Okay, yeah, in Taiwan. So, and then my focus will be here in this East Coast. Yeah, so this is Hualien, and we have about six different tribes in Hualien. Yeah, so this is, so all these different, and then this is, I focus on 12 indigenous restaurants, and you can, how do I choose? First, they have to be, except only one. He's not indigenous people, but he's been working in the indigenous cultural center for over 20 years. And that's why, because they also run a kind of cafe canteen to offer the tourist food. So I interviewed him too. And he actually come up with a lot of interesting perspective. And then you can tell 12 restaurants, 9 are female owners. I don't know, is that because, and it's because it is Coast Amis people, or, oh yeah, but for 女老板, it's a very interesting phenomena too in Taiwan, okay, especially for indigenous. And I have to admit, when I studied this, I haven't really put gender issue into this, but I think for further, that will be an interesting perspective to look at that. And then so I have 22 interview, and then also informal chat with all these people. Yeah, and so here, so food for thought. Let's give you some kind of theoretical things if you want to get more further. And of course, my influence, even I'm a sociology, I also influence a lot by anthropology, by my other supervisors, Anne-Marie Fortier. She used food as kind of belonging. So all this Levi Strauss, food as a signifier, okay, and food as a classifier, and also food as an identity builder to help us to build this identity, to tell people who you are, okay. And I think German food is okay compared to British food, yeah. So they are not famous for that. And yet, you can see with this globalization world, food has become so hybrid, yeah. And then, but how do we use food to claim our cultural identity or ethnic identity? I think it's become much more interesting, yeah. And so also Mary Douglas, and how we use food as a system of communication, how we through food to communicate with others, yeah. And also it's become a way, and Stuart Hall, of course, culture study. I actually located myself with more like a culture study, and on the committee of the Culture Study Association in Taiwan since I left, yeah. So this identity politics about the old identity and new identity, or this identity, mixed identity, yeah, it's also interesting to me too. And it has still influenced Stuart Hall's concept about also representation, yeah. And I also use some geographers' concept of culture geographer concept about this kind of cultural landscape, yeah, and food and restaurant as a cultural landscape, and how we look at that, the meaning and the science. Okay, so far, is that okay? I hope I didn't put you into sleep, but let's get this first, and then we will have something more tasty and delicious things come out. Judith Butler, okay, performing acts. She said gender is always doing, yeah, and for me, ethnicity is always doing. and in how do you perform. Okay, so I borrow a lot of her concept. Mingle with Purdue as the habitus, concept of habitus together. So how did you perform from this kind of innate who you are and who you belong to? Yeah. And Daniel Miller, yeah, culture and materiality. Since I'm back to teach at Donghua, every other year I teach material culture of indigenous people. And that's what I come up with these interesting things about food. And then also recently there's 2 books actually influenced my thought, but it's a collective, and then if you're interested, and I come up with this concept about edible heritage. That's a paper I'm working on now. Okay, so heritage is not only tangible and intangible. I also pivot that into edible heritage. And I come up with 2 books called, one is Edible Identity, food as a cultural heritage, and also heritage cuisines. Okay, and I come up with edible heritage. Hopefully the paper will come out soon, and you got a chance to read that. So that's my theoretical framework for this talk. And now I'm going to use more from my analysis and also the way I interviewed. And then I give you the summary's key point first, because I'm worried sometimes I kind of sidetrack. So here, food. What does food can tell us? Okay, indigenous IR is indigenous restaurant food as a research text. So basically, my talk, as you see, I already use a lot of theoretical cross disciplines, yeah, and also cross cultural. Then interdisciplinary, very interdisciplinary approach, and also I was doing field work, including working in the kitchen. Yeah, so I'm not only customers eating their food, and I also interview them. I also working in the kitchen to know where this material ingredients come from. And because this research I really kind of focused since 2006. And over this decade, I really noticed how the changes through this kind of food performance and how this cultural meaning into them. And indigenous performance is not only singing and dancing. Yeah. And by the way, I also doing research on North American Indian, focused on Spokane tribe. So I have a paper, if you're interested, called Singing and Dancing Matters. Yeah, and then look at power, how they use power and this dress to dress themselves. And then eating, and also this kind of emotional embodiment. It's not only for themselves, it's also for the tourists or the guests and the consumer when they come to Hualien to come to consume in the indigenous restaurant, and their feelings about these connections. And sure, when you choose, there's so many. And in Taiwan, you probably understand about the political situation, yeah, especially during the election time. For those poor Taiwanese independents, they never go to the Chinese restaurant, like a Beijing restaurant or Sichuan restaurant. They will go to so-called Thai restaurant, Taiwan Thai Cai, or they choose indigenous or Hakka restaurant. Because to use food to become a politics for them, yeah, it's interesting. And also this issue of identity and performance. And this, if you look at that, this is a kind of typical kind of amis. They use all this like from betel nuts, yeah, and they made that into a container and then burn the rock, yeah, and this kind of fish. You probably will see later the other, yeah. I'll show you more to make you hungry. Yeah. So field work, I already talked a little bit, but I want to say that visual text, yeah. A lot of people do textual analysis, yeah, and I think that's good, or content analysis. But I think visual text, especially all these cultural space, sites, signs, and cultural symbols, and if you want to make your thesis or your writing more interesting and more like, I think we should combine more about all this, yeah. And because for me, this kind of meaning and then also discourse analysis or critical discourse analysis is also interesting and helpful, yeah. Okay, so that's my methodologies, and here. So first naming, in terms of indigenous restaurant, from the name of the indigenous restaurant itself, because some of you, like, you know, they use their name, and sometimes they use this kind of pan-Indians. sometimes the indigenous, they will use like 原住民餐厅、原住民风味餐, or they will say Amis 风味餐, or sometimes they use their own name. Yeah, or they will use something like a 红瓦屋, like this, red roof or tree house. Okay, they bring this kind of natural connection to their name of their restaurant. And let's look at this picture. It said, my name is Masay. It's Telugu tribal name. Okay, so but he said it's romanization. Many tourists thought I have an English name, and some thought it was French. Yeah, I feel very strange until my daughter told me there's a place in France called Marseille. Many Taiwanese people don't know that we indigenous people use romanizations to study Bible. And that's what yesterday I said, that religion is important for indigenous people. They use Bible for them to get their certain ways of knowledge. Yeah. And my indigenous elder can read Chinese at all. And for a lot of Taiwanese, they don't know this. So see, this is her picture. There's so many things to talk about these pictures. See, this is, you know Telugu, you know for women, you only a good weaver, yeah, 织布, then you can tattoo on your face. But when Japanese come, this has been banned, yeah, but they're still weaving at night, yeah. And then they keep this kind of tradition. And then you see here, this woman has a pipe, yeah, has a pipe and smoke, yeah. And actually, I'll show you another picture. Yeah, it's interesting. And this is Maasai. Yeah, so you can tell. And when they see Maasai, they didn't know. So here, she had to use that to expect to the people. Yeah, and this is kind of 风味餐. Yeah, so she doesn't say 原住民风味餐. She uses her own tribe and her own name to name this indigenous. Yeah, and unfortunately, this banner has been damaged by a couple of years ago, the terrible typhoon in Hualien. And she's going to rebuild that, yeah. But she said she's going to put another woman because she already passed away. So she's going to, and I said, why don't you put yourself, your face? But she said, I don't have tattoo. So tattoo for her, this kind of indigenization for herself, yeah. So they still took this kind of cultural symbol, yeah. So, but this is, for me, it's look like from northern part of China, 很像东北吧. Yeah, so this is supposed to be hunter. There's more exotic, you can see. Okay. Yeah, so far, so naming, yeah, so they use their name. Sometimes it's just pen indigenous, like 原住民. Sometimes they will use their tribe or their own name. And the food also, of course, as economic resources, yeah. And then they start with the guest house, but they don't offer food, but then they will share food. But then the people will say, you can start. So some guests suggest us to sell food, so we do it and give us more income, yeah. And I remember this informant was saying, actually, they just cook for ordinary, like their everyday life, and they will invite people to join them. But when they come to present as food in a restaurant, they don't know how to do it. So they go to try the different indigenous restaurant and to learn or copy it from the other people, yeah, other indigenous restaurant, yeah. So it's interesting. And this is the guy who has been working 20-something years with indigenous people, but original he's a Han Chinese, yeah. He said, doesn't provide me at the beginning, but indigenous food is getting popular, so we follow the flow and have started selling indigenous food. We went to test other indigenous food and do our own way. Now we have created our own specialty, and we learn more, just except those cultural items and tools. So you will see they actually borrow some ideas to perform them and become part of their indigenous life, and they will start to trace back their culture. For example, this is in a 达鲁马克. Now this is 琉琉社. 琉琉社 is 噶玛兰族. It's one of the indigenous tribe. Yeah. So he just practice, and this cultural center become kind of must. You go there. You not only visit the cultural center, you have to experience their food. So they become the so-called expert. And this is also indigenous food as an educational tool. And this is run by two retired teachers. So for them, so you can tell, since you can read Chinese here, so they introduce, so this is Cicong. They introduce the name of the Cicong also from the classic literature, from the poetry. What does that mean? And then also to tell people you can have this kind of, how do you use this plant? And they also have this, see, Na'aho, that's Amis greeting. So they also give people some of the cultural learning. So you come to this restaurant, you can also learn some simple greetings or Amis language. So for them, when he said, we're doing our cultural education for our living ecology. We are pleased to share our Amis culture to our guests. We grow all the indigenous tree and plants so the people can see and touch our culture. When they eat here, they can test and embody our culture as well. So you can tell that those informants themselves, they are not only the indigenous owners, they have the sense of how people can learn the culture through different senses, like touch, smell, and you eat it. Yeah. So they have a different way to embody this different sense and make this culture become part of them. Yeah. And actually, when I start my research, I didn't know I'm going to do research. So I go every time I have a visitor, I bring them to the restaurant and I kind of observe. And gradually I have an informal conversation with them. They're always kind of curious why I keep a lot of notes, what I'm doing here. And then I said, well, I teach at an indigenous college and I want to collect. And they have a lot of different concepts about why they want to run the restaurants. Yeah, and especially these two retired teachers. Yeah, so for them, it's not only money because they have their pension very well, not like me, but they have. and they also, for them, to run the indigenous restaurant, it's really they can provide a cultural platform for people to learn Amis. Yeah. Actually, that's why I say this is another kind of social movement for them. Yeah, okay, I'll say that. And also, it's an intercultural platform or it's a contact zone. Yeah, and this contact zone is, of course, kind of post-colonial concept. Yeah, so this, to me, this is actually very touching when my key informant said, indigenous restaurant is never just a place to sell food. I hope through the indigenous food, people can respect our indigenous cultures. Indigenous people are not people who can drink, sing, dance, and know how to play basketball only. There are many good values in our culture that Han Taiwanese can learn from us. I hope the customers can get some ideas of our ways of living. So in some way, the key informant want to break the stereotype of indigenous people only singing and dancing and drink and good at playing basketball. They also have the other cultural values who people should learn from. So here, there's our life, an indigenous restaurant give them a chance to contact with our culture. Yeah. So, and then this indigenous is also a cultural weapon, and there's kind of a fighting position. The others strike back. I don't know how many people familiar with another anthropology called Joyce. Her research things on Japan. Yeah, she did a lot of Japanese culture, including Christmas, and also including the how they when you give a gift, you not only to give a gift, you have to wrap that beautifully. So Joyce, and her book is Oriental Strikes Back, yeah, which also kind of influenced me thinking about all this, how this the so-called Oriental, the Eastern or the Asian people strike back and to meet with this kind of Western cultures. Yeah. So see, we use indigenous food to talk back to Han Chinese people who can be used as a weapon, which is like doing a social movement. I've been involving with many indigenous environmental and social movements, but the result has been disappointing. And then I've been invited, but the result had, when I returned to Hualien and worked together with my own community, I gradually gained a sense of subjectivity. I have realized that it's our own responsibility to pass our culture. Spiritual, the museum and that museum are that culture which won't help indigenous people at all. However, indigenous restaurants give job opportunity to our people. We also cherish our culture more because of indigenous restaurants. And this is interesting. This is also a lot of young people now, for indigenous people, they can go back to their village and stay there and find a job. And they are not the only indigenous owner themselves. At the same time, they are kind of get this kind of project, cultural project, so they can support themselves. So there's many ways, and this concept about returns, okay, and then James Clifford's concept about return, which also interesting. And my following up actually will be look at those after the return to the indigenous community, what they do and how they use this different, the culture become to really say who they are, also help the community to get their cultural right or their even autonomy too. In Taiwan, a lot of indigenous people, they will say they are nations. 原住民独立国, they want their own, yes. Okay. So here, also, indigenous food is a tourist experience. And I think this is probably very obvious. Yeah. So a lot of indigenous people themselves, they will cook and serve food for tourists. But it's interesting here, the next one is indigenous food as a consuming geography. Yeah, so see here, many tourists told me that eating indigenous meal is one of the authentic, the issue about authentics come back. Yeah, so is this 非常道地正统 or is this real? This is an authentic meal is one of the authentic experience of visiting Hualien. So eating indigenous meal is consuming Hualien. This consuming idea or collecting places is quite interesting in this tourism concept. Yeah. And then we display our vegetable on counter so tourists can take many pictures as they want. One of the tourists told me having so many fresh wild vegetables will bring back freshness of Hualien that she can't get in Taipei. And nowadays, because of air pollution, coming to Hualien for West Coast people is even more because they can get so-called fresh air. And then Hualien is always called the last pure land. 最后净土, the last pure land of Taiwan, yeah. Which I agree, but I think a lot of people kind of romanticize about the freshness, yeah, because we still have industry, we still have 水泥工厂, we still have the polluted water from all the tourists, yeah, down their garbage, yeah. Okay, so indigenous is also the healthy food, yeah. They have this healthy nature discourses, yeah, and then that's actually a selling point. Their selling point about this, so they don't contend about, they don't use the organic because they also know the organic is you need to certificate, yeah. So they use this 很自然很健康, they use this 自然很健康, which I think is an interesting discourse, yeah. So let's look at some, and then. Yeah, and then also this kind of nature discourse. I mean, people that eat mountain and sea. Yeah, so they always say like the nature is our fridge. Yeah, 自然是他们的冰箱. Yeah, and they just go and collect the food from the nature. Yeah. So our indigenous life is very simple. Also, this simple and back to the connection with nature also is one of their discourse, and heritage food as a kind of lifestyle which made them close to nature and they know how to live simple, all these interesting things. Yeah. And then of course they will use how do they present the sense of nature to create this environment or the restaurant. Now let's look at the picture there like this. They even have a wild boar, yeah. Yeah. In their courtyard, yeah, and they have this kind of millet, 小米, yeah, and put that display and all this farming tour, which suppose not connected with indigenous people, but when they put this with this rice roof, yeah, and everything seems so natural, and this is also provide for guests or for consumer or the tourists to the chance to take pictures, and I think they all know it's important. you need to have certain spots for people to taking pictures, not only food. Yeah, so all this, yeah. So they will kind of ethnoize so-called landscape. Yeah, yeah. Yes? So far, any questions? Clear? Yeah, and maybe we can have Q&A later on. Okay, yeah. So also this, then there's more like here. I would like to see how you think. Yeah, let me put it this way. Yeah, this. You probably can't really see. Yeah, but when I saw this picture, I challenged my informant. I said, oh, the restaurant owner, I said, this doesn't look like Amis to me. It looks like a Western girl. And she said, yeah, that's my sense of beauty. I want like that. So they also have their own cultural imagination. Yeah, you will see the other one. And they also, they in their courtyard, you can see the banana trees. For people to see that with banana flowers. They actually, you can eat it. And they use a lot of banana leaf. Yeah, to put on the table. For example, if we have food presentation today here, and then we'll put a banana to use it as a plate, and then put their food. So everything is kind of naturalized. Yeah, okay. So this is more like traditional one, especially Central Amis, traditional clothes. And I have other picture to show you, see. Okay, so for the nature, of course, bamboo, stone, and fuding. Fuding is Amis fish. So there's a fuding restaurant. Yeah. So this is, and then you will see a lot of like driftwood. Yeah, they use driftwood, bamboo, and then every time we were damaged by typhoon, and it's easy to rebuild. So for them to use bamboo, they have reason too, and also it's easy to grow. And now with a lot of green building and eco building, they also encourage people to use this bamboo, also drifting woods. Yeah, and this Sigachuan, and that's a tree house too. But that is Qijiachuan, that's one of the village of the near Shoufeng where I live. This restaurant now is very, very popular. If you go to the lake, yeah, and you can have their food. And they also have this kind of barbecue fish and the chickens, yeah. And this cultural imagination, see, you want some, yeah. And see here, this is interesting. And I heard that somebody already also really extraordinary, right? After this, I also interesting. What do these people eat at home? So that's what I have the other article about tourism and tourism content and also everyday life. And here, they say most of the Han Taiwanese tourists want something exotic and different. So the presentation is important as long as it looks different and exotic, then they think they are eating authentic indigenous food. Most of the dishes in the restaurant are not the way we eat at home. We eat very simple and beautifully displayed like that at home. So this is really a show. They know how to present, and then for the tourist test, they will think, it's authentic. But as they say, they are not eat this at home. And also a lot of food they eat now, very Han, yeah, it's just like me. Yeah, so I also have a research stay with them and record what kind of food they eat every day. It's very simple. But when they have the festival, of course, they do eat certain food which Han Taiwanese won't eat. Yeah. Yeah. And then this. So you see here. I hope you're not hungry. So whenever you go in Taiwan, even this is the East Coast, and if you go to West Coast or the southern part of indigenous community, Hengchuan or Pingdong, you will see the barbecue meat too. This is barbecue 烤肉, 原住民烤肉. And then this fish, see, with heavy salted, and then just barbecue fish. And this is chinavu, it's like an indigenous rice dumpling. It's a little bit like the zhongzi, but it's inside they put either millet, 小米, or the taro power, 芋头粉, for Taiwan's tribes. Yeah, and and then you can have a share meal together, or now it's very popular. It's become a set meal. Yeah, for a person, a set meal. Then you have this wild vegetable, fish, pork, and then you have the soup, and then all the stuff, or a little bit appetizer, this is actually Burmese people. This is for them. They eat this and with salt. Yeah, and that's they can just eat that. Huh? It's kind of onion, but it's an onion, green onion, 路条. It's called 路条, but it's a kind of onion. Yeah, they eat that. It's like a salad. Yeah, and there was when Taiwan has that. Taiwan has that. When I was in UK, what is that? Everybody wear the mask. SARS. Yeah, and they said this plant is good to kill SARS, and that's why East Coast people, most of indigenous people, they don't have to worry about SARS. Yeah, and of course you need the medical proof. Yeah, but it seems like they do contain certain things. Yeah, and they can even anti-cancer. Yeah, so some people, my colleague actually was doing research on this. After he heard my talk. Yeah. So yeah, and then so performing indigenous also, it's not from the restaurant owner or the building, but also from others. For example, mass media, the report from the newspaper or the magazines or the celebrities, or including the president. When the president comes to visit their indigenous restaurant, and that increase their name. And they become more popular, and people will say, well, we have to go there. And I don't know how many people you know Jackie Wu Zhongxian, you probably don't know, but he's kind of, he hosts several variety shows. Yeah, and I said he really enjoyed the fish. He ate all fish in one. And of course, they will take pictures with all those people like this. Yeah, and so it's Harvard University. So if you had you will go and then they will picture together and they will put there. Yeah. Yeah, and they also will show sometimes they win the cooking contest. So they are the first prize. Yeah, and they will put this. Yeah. So you should come and go. I can take you to the restaurant. And they will take a picture together with the authors and sometimes with the president. And also the travel program. The travel program now in Taiwan, they will introduce all this too. So that will make that. And of course, by doing that, this also kind of enforce stereotype. Yeah. So like this, we'll say in the issue, most of the Han Taiwanese have no idea what indigenous food is. They don't understand our culture, so whatever we feed them, they eat. Anyway, as long as they see our dark skin, they thought we are authentic indigenous people. Yeah. And also later I got a picture to show you. Some of the travel agent request us to put our own traditional clothes when they will come to dinner. We will make their request, but we don't wear real traditional dress because it's very troublesome when it gets dirty. We wear a hat of West like me today instead. Some of our workers are from Vietnam and Philippines, but once they put it on the tribal vest, nobody tell the difference. Yes, you know, a lot of my students on the train, they think they are from South Asia. They're Filipinos all the time. Yes. So even Taiwan is so small. See here, can you tell? Her house. This is Amis, yeah, and then she dressed like Amis dress, but she original from Hong Kong. I can't tell until she speaks. Yeah, but now she speaks for the restaurant. Yeah, this is 三番两次. And they sell a lot of things when Chinese tourists come to Hualien a lot. A couple of years ago, this restaurant is one of the top restaurants because they can accommodate like a 4 touring bus, yeah, which most of indigenous restaurants can't. So they are famous. Yeah. So they are. So she is dressed exactly. This is Armenians people when they dress to attend their festival. Exactly. So she told me this dress is exactly Armenian people wear, but she wear that so people, all the tourists thought she's Armenian. And now she can speak a little bit Armenian language, even make her more Armenian. Yeah. And then this is one of you probably got a chance to see. Now our government changed that, the tourists abroad changed that, and I'm happy. See, this is Amis. Actually, all these three ladies, I knew them. they're still dancing during the festival. And here, I think you can read this volume. Yeah. So but this boat is from Lanyu. This is Lanyu's boat. Well, on the Troy, what did you expect? They just put all the indigenous symbol in one go. And now they put one of indigenous, Amis artist called Yu Xifu. They put his painting on the train. And we also have one train, it's all Hello Kitty. See, that's how we promote tourism. Yeah, so see, this is everything. They just met it together in one plate. And indigenous food sometimes, to me, is all this hybridity. It's same to me. So for me, I don't use authentic anymore. I use performs. Yeah, I use staging because nothing to me is authentic as long as it's part of their everyday life. And it might be different from so-called traditions. Yeah, okay. So here, this. Do you say this is Amis? For me, this is also, my goodness, I said, this is kind of Hollywood movie star, you know, and they put that in their indigenous restaurant. Yeah, the husband like it. Yeah, so they repent it because I keep telling them, I say, you're not selling this to anybody, you know, people will make fun of you. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, and then this lady, I interviewed her before. She lived up to 104. And then I remember when the media interviewed her, she said, how can you live such a long life? And she had her middle one on her hand. And then the next, she was smoking. She lived up to 104. So you can tell her tattoo, you can tell. And then she really a good weaver. And I also she still keeps some of her original pieces. And now those weaving, her texture is in the museum. It's a museum pieces now. Yeah, I put in the museum. Yeah. And this is kind of Dao attire. But this is from her and this restaurant. She's also the In-Flight magazine by China Airlines also introduced her. And that made her restaurant so popular because it's bilingual. Or I think trilingual, but including Chinese and English and Chinese. English, Chinese, and Japanese. So, and her restaurant now you have to book. It's so popular now. Yes, yeah. All this. So use people as a cultural objects too to promote this sense of indigenous. Yeah. Yeah. So for performing indigenous, there are several different ways. They can use wild vegetables, wild animal, mineral wine, bamboo sticky rice, and also cooking, the way the preparation, and also interior design, decoration, and cultural displays. And so there's different ways to perform that. Okay, and then this staging is also like here. They can also, this is the name of the restaurant, and they will tell you indigenous. They also sell coffee too, so you can have coffee. And then this is kind of indigenous set meal, so you can have a purple rice, which you only can eat in east coast of Taiwan, also in Hualien. And they tell you about all this they were selling. See here, tea and also cocktail. So they are not only sell so-called pure, but this is cocktail is from mineral wine, and they can make that into kind of special millet. Millet. Yeah. So yeah. Millet. Sorry, millet. Yeah.
I was thinking of an American beer.
Oh, millet. Yeah.
That's what it was.
So for me, this paper actually arguing all this kind of making indigenous through this so-called nature and material object. And this kind of indigenous actually is kind of floating sign. It's not fixed. It could be something different. But there's also kind of repeated theme, which, for example, the discourse of nature, discourse of healthy, and also sometimes they are pan-indigenous. Sometimes they are say, oh, but we Amis are different. Yeah, so they kind of shift this, and also this mingle different culture together. For example, we saw this kind of cocktail, which, when you drink millet wine, is a very special wine. You only drink that during the festival time. But for this, their selling point and its hybridity to meet people's needs. Yes. Yeah. And so food in action, and for me, it's also a strategy and opportunity, and performing this kind of socio-cultural meaning. And it could be a tourist attraction. It can be from indigenous people. They are also a cultural survival for them, because in order to preserve the culture, perform the culture, they need to preserve this kind of the culture. So it's also kind of ways of intercultural communication between tribes, also between guests and tourists, or between just the Han Taiwanese. And it's sometimes, for me, it's interesting, like a living museum. Some of the indigenous restaurants, they try to create this kind of sense of home. And also this who we are, this is how we eat. So they put this kind of so-called backstage kitchen, normally it's backstage, and they put that in a front stage for people now. Now the trend for indigenous restaurant is not just I cook and serve you. They have this DIY project together. Let's cook it together and share. So now it's more engaged with like, they take you to the field to pick up the wild vegetables. And then, so you also know the plants. Okay, and when we back, we cook it together. So all this kind of more like a living museum. So for you to experience and collecting the experience and become part of them, which is very important now. Yeah. And of course, this eating culture and practice for people to know the culture through all these experiences. Yeah. And indigenous food matters. Why? Because here, it's part of promote indigenous tourism, and it's also promote this kind of cultural industries, and combined with creative industry now. So, for example, later, if people ask me questions, you can have this. This is Ali Fong Fong, yeah. And it's supposed that they start with the kind of rice, sticky rice together and steam it, yeah. And you take that as when you go hunting or you go out, yeah. So this is Ali Fong Fong, one of the indigenous, very typical for Amis food, yeah. And now they made that into with different material, the plastic, yeah, and they made that into keyring, yeah. So yeah, so this is something which is still kind of food, the concept from food, but there's something, and they will tell you, and you can also participate to learn how to make your own. So this is kind of have a workshop. You can learn this and you can bring it home. So if you ask questions, you're welcome to take one. Yeah. So see this method.
I don't remember this.
Yeah. This is always get student motivate to ask questions. So here and exalted, and of course eating is always political act. After I've done this research, now eating is not eating just daily, every day we practice. It can be very political aid, yeah. So that's why, and food as weapon to gain the right or interpret this kind of cultural identity is this main focus issue of this paper. So I think that's about, and then of course this is another thing we'll continue doing and there's a distinction, yeah, because you're eating, and of course to sense of this kind of belonging, a connection. That's why I bring some of these things for Taiwanese people who recognize that that's part of things, yeah, and also this kind of performing, this kind of cultural marker, like. Yeah, so this is Amis, yeah. So even I say it's hybrid, but for this, if you know Taiwanese indigenous culture, you right away can recognize this is Amis. This is Amis only, yeah. So, yeah, so I hope you're hungry and for and so thank you for